Haven't I commanded you? Haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous.
Hello again and welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible. As we continue through Joshua, the covenant history section in the prophetic books. We're just beginning this. We've got a few videos done. We're into chapters 9 through 12 of the book of Joshua. And here we're going to see what we have been looking at in crossing over, now taking the land. This is the part we're on. This is the part we're finishing up. Next video will begin the divide section, dividing the land. So how do they take the land? We've seen the beginning of that with Jericho. We've seen that continue with the town of Ai. And now we have the Gibeonites. Now, there's a difference here that we need to see, and a similarity we need to see between Rahab and the Gibeonites. Rahab, that was in Jericho, right, where she essentially converted to being an Israelite. And they were totally cool with that. They accepted her and her whole family in. We talked about that a few videos ago. So she's one of them now. She's part of the Israelites. She worships their God Yahweh. Now, the Gibeonites, they also don't want to die, but their response is different than Rahab. They don't do what Rahab did and essentially say, hey, we want to join you. They have a deceptive method to try to protect themselves. And it seems like with Rahab, it was more a focus on Yahweh and how great he is and how she wanted to be a follower of his. With Gibeon, these people are all looking more out for themselves and like, well, I just know that these people are more powerful and they're going to crush us because their God is so amazing, he'll destroy us. Rather than their God is so amazing, I want to follow him. But the Gibeonites, they do make a covenant. They trick Israel into making a covenant. Israel does not talk to God about this first, does not seek his guidance and counsel, and they're tricked. And they make a covenant, an agreement with the Gibeonites. And the Gibeonites, they're found out eventually, but not until after the covenant's made. And we see here God's commitment to his promises. God fulfills his promises. They would have liked the Israelites to just wipe out the Gibeonites. Okay, we found out you guys actually are people we're supposed to be wiping out. Let's wipe you out. God will have none of that. That's not acceptable. They've made a covenant. They're going to honor that covenant. The Gibeonites are now safe from the Israelites. But Joshua does say, hey, you deceptive guys, you're going to end up being, you're going to be servants that draw water for us and cut the firewood, whatever else, that work for the priests. And they say, great, awesome, means we're not going to die. They were happy to be servants in this context rather than enemies of Yahweh who will be destroyed. Which reminds me of a psalm, Psalm 84, actually, in verse 10. Psalm 84, verse 10 says, talking about being in God's presence. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. So, essentially the same idea of, I would rather be, on the outer edge, the doorkeeper, right? The outer edge of God's presence, the outer edge of the threshold of God's presence. I would rather be in his presence, but far away, in his presence, but in a servant position. I'd rather be there than I would than anywhere else with the enemies of God. I don't want to be there. And in that sense, we can take something positive from this, that this should be our mindset, that we would rather be anywhere with God than anywhere away from him and against him. And so the Gibeonites do have that part of it right. Again, not the same mindset as Rahab had, and they're not going to be in the same position as Rahab. But generally speaking, we can take that broadly and say this is the mindset for us to have versus everyone else we're about to see after, all these other nations. These other people we see in chapter 9, as soon as all the kings who are beyond the Jordan, in the hill country and in the lowlands, all along the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. And this right here, these people are all making a different response, because it then continues, but when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard, and it tells you about Gibeon. So you have all these other people. Their response is not like Rahab to say, I want to follow Yahweh. Their response is not like Gibeon to say, let me just find some way to get on that side of the fence. Their response is, I'm over here, I'm staying over here, I want to be over here, forget you. They are rejecting God. They obviously have the option to be on that side. We see that in other cases, and they say no. They don't want anything to do with Yahweh. And so they go to attack. They are defeated. And actually, when they see, we have this instance where these guys see that, oh, the Gibeonites, they're on that side now. They're with Joshua and the Israelites. They're with Yahweh. And that means we're going to attack them. So the Gibeonites are now going to be attacked by the enemies of God because they've aligned themselves with Yahweh, with that side. But when they go attack the Gibeonites in chapter 10. And what happens? Well, we see again God's promises. There was a covenant made between God's people and the Gibeonites. They're on the same side. They are both Yahweh's group now, right? And so, even though there's certainly, we can see that some of the Israelites might have said, we're not allowed to kill them. We're not, we can't do that anymore because we made a covenant with them. We can't do anything. But, do we have to help them out when someone else attacks them? Do we have to get there really quickly? Well, yes, you do, because you made a covenant. And part of that covenant is, if you're on God's side, he protects you. If you are his, then he's got you covered. This includes the Gibeonites who got there by deception. Even the ones who got there in the wrong kind of a way, God still is their protector. God still has made that covenant relationship, and he's going to follow through with it. So his people go, and they wipe out their enemies, protect the Gibeonites. And this, not just this one time either. God made a covenant, and that's holding up continually. We'll actually look when we go to Samuel. So we're in Joshua now, then we got Judges, then we got Samuel. Well, in Samuel, Saul actually wipes out a bunch of the Gibeonites. This is probably when he's attacking the priests, because remember, the Gibeonites become servants for the priests. He wipes out a bunch of priests illegitimately because he's throwing a temper tantrum because of King David, who's not King David yet, but will be King David, and Saul's upset about that. And that actually causes a famine. God sends a famine to the land, and he says specifically it's because of what Saul did to the Gibeonites. Because there's a covenant with the Gibeonites, you can't attack them. Saul did attack them. Now there's judgment on the nation of Israel because of that. So God is protecting people that he's in covenant with, and he's bringing judgment on those who would harm them. And so you have this covenant benefit of being protected by the true God. And we wrap up this part about taking the land with there's several chapters of just basically the Israelites are going through and destroying their enemies, taking the land. And again, I'll repeat, I've said this at the beginning, I've said this many other times, they had a choice, because we just saw that the Gibeonites, they're not going to be destroyed. We saw Rahab, she's part of Israel now, and actually is one of the ancestors of Jesus himself. So They have this option that they don't want, that they reject. And so instead, they're fighting, they're getting wiped out, and we have these kings that get captured. And what happens to these enemy kings? These enemy kings, they have rebelled. They have said, you know what? Let's go fight against Yahweh. And now they're captured and they're hung on trees. And we saw earlier in this was last class and the law books. We saw that it is a sign of being cursed to be hung on a tree. And so these kings are hung on trees. They're cursed. And then they're taken from those trees, their bodies, and they're put in a cave with a stone rolled in front of that cave. And they don't come out. That's the end. We see, in contrast, when we look forward to the New Testament, because all of the Old Testament, all this in red here, the law, the prophets, the writings, it's all pointing to the cross, pointing to Jesus, who he is and what he did. And here we get kind of a picture of these terrible, evil kings. And we need a better king than that. We need a king who is going to be a good king for us. We need a king that's better than anything we see here. And we've had that king, Jesus, who was hung on a tree, not because he was cursed for his own evil, as they were, but because he was cursed for our sins. And he was hung on a tree, on the cross. He was put in a cave with a stone rolled in front of that cave. But it didn't end there. He did come out 3 days later. Unlike these kings who are judged for their own evil, who are put in a cave, and it's the end of their story, Jesus was different. Jesus was the good king who took the curse that we deserved upon himself, and he came out of that cave and rules forever. And so here, even in something where we just see this long list of battles of enemies, and we say, okay, there's this kind of historical narrative, what's going on here? This long lists can get a little bit difficult to focus on for a lot of people. Like, what's going on here? With all this list of people they fought and places they went, and we have this conquest in the southern area of the Promised Land and the northern area of the Promised Land. What's going on here? Well, even in all this, we're seeing a glimpse of what's needed. Sometimes we get to see a picture of Jesus in someone who's faithful, like Joseph in Genesis. Other times we get to see a picture of Jesus in seeing where that gap is, seeing where others have failed, and we say we need something better. And we know that actually Jesus fulfilled that, as we see when he comes in the New Testament. So that's the end of this section on taking the land, this promised land. God promised them. Remember, fulfillment of the promises. He promised many things, and he promised one of those things is they're going to have that land. They crossed over. They took the land. And lastly, when we're talking about promises, there's another promise that you may have forgotten from much earlier on, actually. When we have, if you go back to Genesis, all the way back to Genesis right after the flood, almost the very beginning of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 9, what are we told in Genesis chapter 9? There's this curse of Canaan. A lot of people think of it as the curse of Ham. If you go back and look at my video on that, you can put a link below. That is incorrect, and people get the wrong idea on that, and end up have historically come up with some terrible and crazy views on that. But it's the curse of Canaan, who was a son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. So this is Noah's grandson, Canaan. And it says, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He, Noah, also said, Blessed be Yahweh, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. So Canaan is the one where all these Canaanite tribes come from, including the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites are descendants here, and so we're seeing this fulfilled, that this line, this part of Canaan, is becoming servants of Israel, who is from the line of Shem. And so way back in Genesis 9 we had this, and now all the way here in Joshua, we're finally seeing that come to fruition. All of God's promises, they do get fulfilled. God is faithful and true to his word. We've seen that here. We'll continue to see that, and it's ultimately, most importantly, shown in his promise that Jesus would come and save us. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.